military commander is huddled over his computer, staring intensely into the screen. He is mobilizing his troops to storm the enemy's base. He gives his final commands and got things rolling. He waits as his troops march in formation towards their goal. His mouth dries as the anticipation grows. Is this a march to victory or to hell? As the first salvo rings across the room, he senses something amiss. A churning. And then he bowed to the porcelain god, as the saying goes. I was their commander. I just got a copy of the latest Red Alert. Red Alert 2. And I've been playing at the game for 8 whole hours. Okay, I don't remember getting out from the seat at all. Time passes by when you're having fun. Well, maybe not so fun for my mother, who was doing her chores in the kitchen when I dashed out of the room to go to the toilet. And you can tell she's not very impressed when I told her, I defeated the Allied forces. But yeah, we care. Games and I go way back. At first, it was the chesses, international, Chinese, and even animal chess. Then I became obsessed with the Lone Wolf, Choose Your Own Adventure books. I don't know if anybody of you remember this. I remember going down to the second-hand bookshop every other day after school just to check out if there were new titles available. But I remember the exact moment when my current compulsion with games manifested itself. An 8-bit MS-DOS game called Bandit Kings of Ancient China. It was actually based off this Chinese classics called The Water Margin. It was my first encounter with video gaming, and I was absolutely enthralled. For the first time, I was a real hero to real people. There were real fights, and the visceral sense of accomplishment and satisfaction after winning challenges was absolutely amazing. I was in love. But as do all great love stories go, there's always this tiny bit of complication. I did not have my own computer, so I had to use my friends to play this game. So every day after school, I would sneak over to his place, using the age-old excuse of school project to placate my ever-vigilant mother. But luckily, I got my own computer shortly after, and the rest, as they say, is history. These are my characters from MMORPG that I've been playing for the last 5 years. MMORPG stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. It's quite a mouthful, but descriptively accurate. Okay. This is Cycroft, my oldest character. Okay, handsome, right? So, I've been playing on average 36 hours a week since I started playing. And by some calculations, I would have spent approximately 9,000 hours with that character. Much more than I spent with my family for the last 5 years, definitely. So how did we, or rather I, get here? This is the Senate. Okay, it's a game that they found in Egyptian burial sites that date as far back as 3000 BC. It could be considered one of the first games in the world. The objective of the game is to get from one end of the board to the other end, right? So the pieces in the game actually represent human souls, and the movement across the boards, the journey of the soul through afterlife. Each square also has their own religious significance, with the end square being the union of the human soul with the sun god. Of course, anthropologists and archaeologists have since found different games from different civilizations all over the world, some of which we still play today. Here's for you, Patsy. So for those of you who don't play games, though I assure all of you that you do, which I shall demonstrate later, or which I've already demonstrated, the question you must ask is, what's so fun about games? Trust me when I say I ask myself the same question. What compels me to spend all my waking hours expending all my energy working on tasks that has absolutely no bearing on my physical well-being. Well, maybe some negative well-being, negative effects from my story on real life. Switzer and Wyeth in 2005 actually developed a game flow model to explain why we enjoy games. So in this model, we have 8 elements: concentration, challenge, player skills, control, clear goals, feedback, immersion, social interaction. So for concentration, it means that the games actually grab your attention immediately and holds on to it. For challenge, it means that the players are challenged sufficiently according to their levels and skills. And of course, the challenge increases as the player progresses in the game itself. For player skills, it means that the game actually encourages the development and helps in development of player skills, and of course, giving rewards to them. Control, establishing a player's sense of control a game, not just in the interface, but within the world of the game itself. Clear goals and clear feedback, providing all these things at the appropriate time. Immersion. So immersion is almost similar to concentration, except concentration will be on the gameplay itself, whereas immersion is on the environment. So you get immersed in the environment. Social interaction, support and create opportunities for social interaction. So I've actually done, so this is a short video of me running through the game, which I mentioned earlier, which is Guild Wars 2. Over here we see some elements of the game flow model here. So at the top right corner you see there are these 2 tasks. So there's the personal story tasks and there's the daily tasks, right? So there are clear goals that players are directed towards. So for the daily task, it's not story oriented, so players have a sense of control to choose if they want to complete it or not. And it's a little bit small here. If you can notice, there are some like percentages here, right? The percentages gives clear feedback to the players, how much of the task they completed, how much is there left to go. And over here you can see a mini map of the place. If you see this green swirl, I believe all of you can see. So this green swirl is actually a direction to the personal story. If you want to complete your personal story, come to this place, right? And you proceed in the current direction. And over here on the left corner, we see a little chat box. So this chat box allows you to chat with the world, which is essentially everybody online at that moment in time, your guild mates or your teammates if you were playing in a team, or individual, right? So you provide a social interaction element in this part. If you can see, okay, it's very small. So at this chat box, this is where people actually come for help as well. Oh, how do I do this? How do I go about doing this thing? How do I accomplish this? Right? And everybody provides help here. So I will now play this short video in which we will see the immersion elements of. Oh dear, it's not playing. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Technical difficulties. Oh. So there's Cycroft running through and gliding. Oh. And this is the sort of image that you actually see as you run through the world. Very exquisitely designed space for you to actually feel like you're being transported to another world entirely. Yeah, this is one of my favorite places to run through. So if ArenaNet, which is the company that made the game itself, can actually get me to spend all my time in a virtual world doing virtual tasks and actually feeling good about it, surely they are onto something, right? So actually, many research has been done to see how they can harness the potential of games in both teaching and learning. So which brings me to David Williamson Schaeffer, who is a professor of educational psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a game scientist, okay, at the Wisconsin Center for Education Research. So he argues that our old ways of yesterday's method of teaching children are are no longer sufficient to prepare them for tomorrow's challenges. He actually goes on to say that the advent of computer and video games can change education because computers now make it possible to learn on a massive scale by doing the same things that people do in the world outside of school. He further proposes that computer and video games represent a new epistemology, a new way of learning and thinking. His colleague James Paul G., Mary Lou Fulton Presidential Professor of Literacy Studies at Arizona State University, also argues that computer games actually is actually an embodiment of human creativity and problem solving. And I think a great example is a 9th grade teacher in Atlanta, USA, who uses the wildly popular game Angry Birds to concretize the principles of projectile motions for his students back in 2011. In Singapore, we have another example. John Misich, an NUS professor, actually created a game. So instead of publishing a book about the history of Singapore in the 14th century, he took a page out of World of Warcraft and created World of Temasek to teach about the culture and ways of life of Temasek, as Singapore was known then. But teachers and academics are not the only one who recognize the power of games. How many of you have a fitness tracker? For example, Fitbit? No? How about a Starbucks rewards card? Okay, great. Businesses have tapped into the potential of games to motivate their customers to behave in desirable ways, which is to buy more, to use more. This is what we call gamification, the use of gaming elements in non-gaming contexts. If we go back to our example of Fitbit and Starbucks. So over here we see that Fitbit actually tells you which are your best days, how much you have walked, and also with a manifestation of your accomplishment, coupled with information about who's the winner last week, right? It actually motivates you to want to accomplish more, to do more, and thereby using more Fitbit app. And for Starbucks, it's so like the game that I've been playing, right? You start at the base level and you progress progressively up to reach the topmost level, which is the goal level. Okay, so what it does is it tries to evoke a sense of prestige as you move up the level. And what could be more prestigious than a personalized go-kart, a free drink on your birthday month, and free food, right? But how do you progress up the levels? You earn more stars. And how do you earn more stars? By drinking more Starbucks. Yes. And gamification can also be used to solve problems. This is a protein structure. How it is arranged in space actually affects its properties. Scientists for many years have actually sought the help of crowds to do that by getting them to contribute their computing power to run complex algorithms. Eventually, some of the volunteers wrote in to say, oh, if only we could interact with the protein structure during the folding process, perhaps we can do something about it. And voila, the folded app was born. So what happens is participants actually signed up and compete with each other to see who can come up with the most viable structures. And of course, these are verified by the scientists back in the lab. Back in 2011, a group of the folded participants actually managed to uncover the structure of an AIDS-related enzyme in just 3 weeks. Why just? Because the same protein structure has been befuddling scientists for the last 10 years. Now, let's backtrack a little in time to 1988. Suzanne Segerman was fresh out of college and full of ideals. So naturally, she went to PBS, which is the Public Broadcasting Service in the United States. After one of her projects, her editor actually handed her a floppy disk, okay, a game that was just released called Hidden Agenda. She thought nothing much about it, and when she got home, she just tossed the diskette on her desk and forgot all about it. that same evening, just as she was preparing to go to a party, and to quote her, she never misses a party, she saw the disc on the desk and thought, what the hell? 6 hours later, she finally got up from her computer. And 16 years later, she founded Games for Change. Secondman was one of the many converts who believe that games are not just, as in games are not just more for entertainment, right? Games can teach, games can illuminate, games can change the world. Imagine playing as a defender of your own body against cancer cells, using various methods that are based on real cancer treatment. Imagine being a boy traversing his own island, which is severely affected by global warming. Imagine playing as the Prime Minister of Israel or the President of the Palestine Liberation Organization, navigating your way through difficult political situations. I came across this game a couple of years back, called This War of Mine. This game was inspired by the wartime atrocities that the Bosnian civilians had to endure during the 1992-96 siege of Sarajevo. So this game centers around various characters trying to survive everyday dangers by making difficult decisions, such as when a kid comes to you, approaches you in the heart of winter, do you turn the little kid away but grow hungry? Or do you give the kid your final piece of bread and end up growing dead yourself the next day? I started playing, and over a span of week, I actually restarted the game 10 times. I never won the game, and I don't think I ever will. Games don't just entertain. Games can sometimes heal. Ryan and Amy Green welcomed their third child, Joel, into the world in November 2009. A year later, Joel was diagnosed with an especially aggressive form of cancer. Doctor gave Joel 4 months to live, but Joel proved them wrong. However, the cancer actually impeded Joel's mental development, and he could barely speak even at the age of 2. Tumors continued to grow in Joel's small, frail body, and the visits to the hospital increasingly took its toll on the family. In early 2014, 4 years after the first diagnosis, Joel's condition worsened, and the experimental drug that he was on was not helping. And under the advice of the hospice, Ryan and Amy had to make the difficult decision of removing Joel's feeding tube. And he died on May 13th, 2014, at the age of 5. So initially, Ryan, who's a programmer, started on a project to deal with the strains of caring for Joel, but eventually became a memorial for Joel. And in 2016, he released a game called That Dragon Cancer. So in it, players go through abstracted scenes based on the Green's experience raising and caring for Joel, while simulating the pain and trials of watching your child die. In an interview with Wired, Amy Green said, Ryan was able to spend the last year of Joel's life and all the time since he died working on this game. We love for it to impact people and for it to be commercially successful. But there's a piece of me that says, maybe it's just for us.